This week we finally make it into the official intracoastal waterway as we leave Hampton, Virginia through Great Bridge and beyond. Let's go ahead and get into it, so grab a drink, climb aboard, and let's get going. This week we pick up in Hampton, Virginia, where we anchored right beside Fort Monroe. Fort Monroe is surrounded by a moat. The six-sided bastion fort is the largest fort by area ever built in the United States. During the initial exploration by a mission headed by Captain Christopher Newport in the early 1600s, the earliest days of the colony of Virginia, the site was identified as a strategic defensive location. Beginning by 1609, defensive fortifications were built at Old Port Comfort during Virginia's first 2 centuries. The first was a wooden stockade named Fort Algernon, followed by other small forts. However, the much more substantial facility of stone that became known as Fort Monroe was completed in 1834 as part of the third system of U.S. fortifications. The principal fort was named in honor of U.S. President James Monroe. Although Virginia became part of the Confederate States of America, Fort Monroe remained in Union hands throughout the American Civil War. It became notable as a historic and symbolic site of early freedom for former slaves under the provisions of contraband policies. For 2 years thereafter, the former Confederate President Jefferson Davis was imprisoned at the fort. His first months of confinement were spent in a cell of the casemated fort walls that is now part of its casemate museum. Fort Monroe was deactivated September 15, 2011, and many of its functions were transferred to nearby Fort Eustis. Several reuse plans for Fort Monroe are under development in the Hampton community. On November 1, 2011, President Barack Obama signed a proclamation to designate portions of Fort Monroe as a national monument. On one side of our anchorage was Fort Monroe, and on the other side was the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. The HRBT is a 3.5-mile, 4-lane facility comprising bridges, trestles, man-made islands, and tunnels under the main shipping channels for Hampton Roads Harbor. Given its proximity to the U.S. Navy's Atlantic Fleet home base, the HRBT design incorporates a tunnel instead of a more cost-effective drawbridge. A bridge tunnel, if destroyed in wartime or due to natural disaster, would not block the vital shipping channels. The next morning we got up and left Hampton, Virginia with a goal of reaching Chesapeake, Virginia. The morning was a little rough as we crossed the James River, and I apologize for some of the video coming up. It does rock a little bit, so if you get seasick, I don't know if this will trigger it, but just turn your head to the side. Things calmed down quite a bit as we entered the Elizabeth River, which is the official start of the Intracoastal Waterway. It's always fun going past the Norfolk Naval Shipyard and checking out all of the military ships. Naval Station Norfolk is the headquarters and home port of the U.S. Navy's Fleet Forces Command. The installation occupies about 4 miles of waterfront space and 11 miles of pier and wharf space. It is the world's largest naval station, with the largest concentration of U.S. Navy forces through 75 ships alongside 14 piers, with 134 aircraft and 11 aircraft hangars at the adjacently operated Chambers Field. And apologies for all of that history junk. You know, I love that part of the country. It's just such a neat part of our early history, having grown up in the Midwest. You know, you go down the road and there's a farmhouse, and then there's a farmhouse, and then there's a farmhouse, and just everything's a farmhouse. So it's, you know, it's neat to see some of those early fortifications from the start of the United States' history. And I know there's a rich Native American history that goes back further than that. I dug into that quite a bit when I was in Arizona. So the country's got some really, really neat history, but I don't know, to me it seems like the coolest stuff is like on the East Coast, the West Coast, and then the Southwest. So I'm probably wrong about that. I just don't know about the other regions' histories. But anyway, I digress. That morning we had left Hampton, Virginia, and went down through Norfolk and Portsmouth and jumped on the ICW and ended up in Chesapeake, Virginia. It was a pretty short trip, only about 25 nautical miles. And I did some really neat videos through Norfolk and Great Bridge last time I came through in the spring, so I didn't really do a lot of filming here. Right now you're looking at the Great Bridge opening. But I didn't do a lot of filming, so if you want to see those areas, I've got some really good drone videos of those, so click on the links. I'll list them right down below in the description. We ended up staying in Great Bridge, Virginia for 3 days. We had a lot of work to get done, and we also needed to wait for a weather window so we could get down to North River. To get from Great Bridge to North River, you have to go through the Albemarle and Chesapeake Canal. That takes 1 full day for us to get there. And then we had to time it so that we could cross Albemarle Sound on a relatively not windy day or a calm day. Albemarle Sound is somewhere between 12 and 13 miles wide. It's relatively shallow body of water, but it does get sporty if the wind is above 15 knots. So we tried to cross it on a day when the wind was going to be between 5 and 10 knots, which we did. And it was nice, the wind was with us, so we got a little bit of a boost for half of the day, and we made pretty good time. And then we made it down to the very bottom of Alligator River, and we anchored just after the sun went down. So it was 2 very long days back to back. Hey y'all, we left Great Bridge this morning and we just anchored in the North River. Albemarle Sound is right over that way. We're gonna tackle that tomorrow morning. And this is one of my favorite places. There is no one anywhere near us, which is awesome. I love it, it's beautiful. We got here just after sunset. All right, hope y'all are well. And I'm pretty sure with everything that's gone wrong on this trip, someone out there has a serious beef with us and has put a hex on us. I had the camera rolling as we crossed Albemarle Sound and as we went through the Alligator River Swing Bridge, but one of my GoPros has been a little bit wonky lately, so that footage was lost and was unrecoverable. So here you get to see us bopping around, getting ropes and lines ready. I can't believe I just said rope. I am so sorry. Please don't downvote this. It's a line. It's not a rope. Sailors will get that. So I had to get the lines ready to go into the Blackbeard's Cove Marina and Pub, where I had spent last winter, and I was going to stay there for a couple of weeks to get a wind generator installed. Now, why do I need a wind generator? Well, last year, if you've been watching our videos, you know I did a 7-day test of our solar system, 7 cloudy days in a row, and everything was great. We topped up, everything was fine. But it turns out that that is not, or was not, a realistic, real-world scenario, which I should have known, but I am stupid, so I didn't. So coming down Chesapeake Bay, the clouds, it was the worst weather for about 6 weeks. We had like 2 sunny days, and what didn't register at the time was our solar panels when we were at the marina were always oriented towards the sun, and when you're at anchor, you blow at the whim of the wind. So half of the time our solar panels weren't even facing the wind, or the sun for days at a time. So we weren't bringing in very much power. And with the demise of our alternator, when we were leaving Mill Creek, we had no other source of power besides the solar panels. And when the engine is running, it uses between 4 and 6 amps of power when it's running. So by running, or by motoring, I'm actually consuming my battery bank. So we were topped off in Mill Creek, and then it had been maybe 2 weeks between Mill Creek and then getting down to Great Bridge. And by the time we got there, our battery bank, we had been slowly bleeding off between 5 and 8% of our battery bank per day. So our battery bank is quite large. It's 900 amp hours of lithium iron phosphate. And once I get down to about 25%, that's when I really start getting nervous. because you can only drain the batteries for lithium iron phosphate down to about 10%. And you're getting in that window where, I got a little nervous. So when I was in Great Bridge, the Atlantic Yacht Basin is the only marina that's there. So my plan was to stay at the free dock for 2 days and then stay at Atlantic Yacht Basin, and my inverter is actually a charger as well, so I could recharge my batteries just by plugging them in. But unfortunately, the Atlantic Yacht Basin was booked solid, so they had no availability for me to stay a night at their transient dock. So I was freaking out a little bit. I called their fuel dock and I begged them, I explained the situation, fried the alternator, my batteries are almost dead. I really need to recharge my batteries just at least to 45% so I can make it to Belhaven. And the dude at the fuel dock, he was so cool. I mean, he literally saved us. He said, yeah, we'll make some room. Come over to our fuel dock. You can plug in. How long do you think it'll take? And I'm like, well, I did the math. It was a 3,000 watt inverter. So I figured it should maybe take me 2 hours, 2.5 hours to get back to full. Well, I had never used the inverter as a charger before, and I didn't realize it's a 3,000 watt inverter, but it's not a 3,000 watt charger. So the charge rate is much lower. It only put in about 75 amps. So they were super cool. They allowed us to stay there. I stayed there for 6 hours, and we got the battery bank back up to 55%. So I knew we'd make it to Belhaven with no issues. So thank you to Atlantic Yacht Basin. Super cool guys. They're willing to work with you, so I can't say enough about them. I've stayed there before on previous trips, and it's just a great place. They've got a great chandlery, one of the better equipped yards, especially on the ICW right there. So that was great. So our power is not sufficient. Our solar panels is not sufficient this time of the year, this far north, especially when the weather is as crappy as it has been. So the plan was to get to Belhaven, reunite with Blackbeard's Cove Marina and Pub, and hang out with Deb for a while and help her out and get the wind generator installed, which is actually what I'm working on right now. So I'll be bringing that to you guys in the next few weeks. And yeah, so some of the assumptions that I made earlier were not correct. And I'm learning a lot on this trip, which is awesome. I'm figuring this out as I go. And it's this whole trip ever since leaving Delaware City has been a little bit of a disaster. So I'm looking forward to turning this thing around and having some positive experiences. So, alrighty. Hope y'all are well. And that's it for this week. Tune in next week to watch as we try and figure out how to install a wind generator using parts from a small town hardware store. It's going to be interesting. I would love to give a massive shout out to our Patreon crew. Big shout out right up front to our new patron, Edwin Sauter. I hope I am pronouncing your name correctly. Your support is very much appreciated. Welcome to the El Jaleo Patreon crew, and I hope you enjoy the bonus content, Edwin. Thank you so very much. Our other Patreon crew members are Joan and Juddy Judnick, Val and Chris Alcorn, Denise and Eli Sackett, Joan and Jim Linbo, Sherry Erickson, and Deb Shaw. Thank you guys so very much. Right now, you guys are the only ones keeping me going. So without your guys' support, these videos wouldn't be possible. That's just the truth. So thank you so very much. It means the world to me. If you are interested in joining our Patreon crew, there is a link in the description down below, and that'll give you access to all of our bonus videos, our bonus photos, content, current updates, that kind of stuff. And you would also help support the channel, which would be awesome. If you do like our videos, please like, comment, and subscribe. That also helps us out a ton. So I hope you guys are well. I hope things are going good in your world, and we'll see you next week.